Welcome back. You're watching NewsX. I'm Rishabh Gulati. We are expecting post the Quad first ever virtual meeting, press statement or a briefing to be given our way by somebody senior in the Ministry of External Affairs while we're waiting for that, because it is so important that that happens and that all of us register it as the pivotal moment, because history will be written as this is the thing when things really began. We've had the foreign ministers meet, and of course we've had so many conversations, but this is when it becomes serious. Game's on, okay? It's as serious as it gets. Literally the future of the world is at stake. Literally world peace is at stake. Is that serious? We've been having a very lively conversation. I just want to take this into a slightly different tangent, because while we spend all our focus looking at China directly, they spend a lot of their focus looking at us indirectly. And that's not just us, that means the Americans, the Aussies, they'll get the WHO to blame Australia for coronavirus somehow, okay? It's magic. Suddenly, there might be some incident that takes place in France, and France becomes Islamophobic. There are very many indirect ways that they play the game, which we need to pay attention to. So let me quickly pick up this conversation. Sri Iyer is still with us. Ambassador Kapoor is still staying with us. Professor Nadalpat is joining us in the broadcast. Ambassador Achal Malhotra joining us in the broadcast. And Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha joining us as well. Vice Admiral, here we are, sir. The talking has at least resulted in the summit. We have now consensus that we are doing the right thing. I've never had so many people, as I've mentioned, probably had dozens and dozens through the day, all who agree from various countries that this is a good thing that is taking place for the global order. So now it boils down to, what do we now do next? Vice Admiral.
Thank you, Rishabh, for getting me on this program. We have to keep moving forward rather than sitting on our laurels as to what has happened so far. The first thing that requires to be done is to make this a proper institution where there is a record of all the discussion and there is a method of putting those decisions taken at the summit level into practice. And the diplomats will have to do a lot of work here. I can see that. That's number one. The second thing is, President Biden mentioned, that this is dedicated to conflict management. Now, that's a very important statement that he's made. And he has gone on to say that it is a new mechanism being established for regional peace and stability governed by international norms. These are not only big words, Rishabh, but if you look at it, I think he's trying to say that all that applied to the international waters, it will now apply in this region as much, and these four countries are going to protect those international
but what is the stick? Okay, if that's the word, what is the stick following up with it? I mean, if somebody then does not abide by regional peace and stability, what are the consequences they'll have to face?
That's right. What's going to happen is that this is the charter which the organization has to work on. It's very good to say that free and open sea. What happens if it is not free? How is Quad going to enforce this? So I would think that firstly it will probably be all economic sanction measures, or maybe deprive China of trade with these four countries, because they are very important countries in this region and also in the world. Move the supply chain very quickly out of China.
I mean, it's all easier said than done. I mean, in the end, if the Chinese supported the North Koreans getting a nuclear weapon, the North Koreans did get a nuclear weapon despite everything else the world tried. It's all easier said than done. But the era of no consequences. I mean, there's no such thing as a perfect consequence or a perfect rebuttal, because it's not like the Chinese are sitting on their hands either. But the era of no consequences, at least, perhaps is over. Professor Nadalpat, here we are, sir. I mean, it's good news all around. A good tone and tenor, great body language. All the right things have been said, pretty much in consensus by everyone. They've all repeated pretty much each other's statements, at least what we know publicly. What else happened, hopefully we'll know shortly. How do you take it? A good start?
Well, I'd like to say, Rishabh, it's a very good start, because it's only at the summit level that key decisions can be taken. And my limited knowledge of diplomacy is that leaders don't meet unless there's already a kind of a consensus reached among them as to the next steps forward. Whether that is made public or not, and in the situation that in which the kind of war that is being faced on multiple fronts, it may be better for some matters not to be discussed in public. Well, I'd like to say it's a very good start. The second point which you said about consequences, I have been a very firm believer in reciprocity all my life. You know, you get something negative, then all right, reciprocity. You get something positive, reciprocity, preferably with compound interest, both with compound interest. And my point is, if at all, let us say the PLA continues its friskiness on the border, well, the Indian Navy needs to show its presence in the ASEAN seas. And I would like to say the significance of the Quad is that we need a coordinated position on this issue, a clear position, and any kind of an attack or infringement of the rights of one country is an infringement of the rights of all four countries, and all four will react in that manner. There is no point in Mr. Suga hiding behind a curtain if it's only happening to India or Australia or the US, or let us say Australia or India or the US hiding behind a curtain. All four of these countries need to show a similar activity if no matter which country is affected. I think that reciprocity is important. I expect to see a lot of traffic in the Taiwan Straits. I expect to see a lot of traffic in what is now called the East China Sea, but may tomorrow, like I said, I mean, frankly, I'm surprised anybody calls it the South China Sea. It's actually the ASEAN seas, because it's ASEAN that is the littoral states there. I don't see why China should be in the picture at all.
I need to update my map.
Don't see that. So I'd like to say, I would like to see reciprocity.
Okay.
And if we have reciprocity, I can tell you, tit for tat, tat for tit. If we do that kind of thing, in my view, the Chinese will understand the game and there will be peace.
But
you can only have peace if you show that you're strong enough not to fear war.
Rest assured that this resolve will be tested. Only two things can happen, and this is what I've been discussing. Either the Chinese say, okay, let's wait a few weeks. Eventually, all this rhetoric will subside, and these guys are too diverse and too chaotic, and somebody will say you're partly free and you're less free, you're Myanmar, and they'll fight amongst each other and they'll drift away. Or let us test them and see. So that test is coming. Ambassador Achal Malhotra, the Chinese are not going to sit on their hands. They will test the measure of our resolve. And if the measure of resolve have been taken today, it cannot be taken for granted. So when the test comes our way, I don't know when it will come, next week, next month, next year, how will we be judged? What is the proof of the pudding, sir?
Well, Rishabh, let me begin by saying that this grouping called Quad has been evolving over a period of time at a very, very slow rate. 2007, the idea was conceived, and for next 10 years, there was no talk about it. 2007, it was revived, it was taken to the level of ministerial conferences, and finally, it has reached a stage where the first summit meeting has taken place. My point of concern has always been that after none of these meetings, there has been a joint statement, which means, and also whatever readouts each country has given, there doesn't seem to be 100%, that they are on the same page. There is, the overall perception is there, very much there, that the core idea of forming this group is to contain China's expansionist design. But to what extent each of the four countries is willing to rock its boat with China is not clearly spelled out.
Okay, so if we, okay, so,
and also,
so are we to assume,
this,
are we to assume, Ambassador Achal Malhotra, are we to assume that if we can't even still agree on a joint statement, then how will we agree when China, starts, bombing or sending ships somewhere?
Yes, definitely. We first must be clear about it. To what extent and to how far we are willing to take this grouping. I think there are a couple of ingredients which are needed. One, first of all, it has to be converted into a formal arrangement or agreement. Some secretariat or some institutional structure is to be given. Some ideas have to be brought out. It has to be expanded. The ASEAN centrality, just by saying that Quad, we are having Quad or this cooperation, collaboration with ASEAN,
centrality is alone not enough. It should be Quad plus, clear-cut, spelled out ideas. And I don't mind in even saying that the overall perception that it is, it is being dealt just to insulate and isolate China. Somehow that also has to be diluted by diverting the activities from security related issues to many other issues.
No, so
For
we're doing that
example,
already. I mean, the agenda, I mean, I'm assuming they're discussing other things. But
yes,
the agenda on the
definitely.
face of it is
and
vaccines.
Even
Yeah.
there, Rishabh, even there, let me complete. Even there, the impression is going to go that this expanded agenda is targeted against China. Take, for example, supply chains, international supply chains.
Because
We want to
it's
bring
not the
about-
impression, that's the truth. That's exactly what it is. Okay, just stay with me. The MEA
Yeah.
is holding his briefing. Let's listen in.
Meeting of the Quad countries with Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi joining Prime Minister Scott Morrison of Australia and Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga of Japan and President Joe Biden of the United States in a virtual summit. The historic nature of today's event will be obvious to you. That the four countries have upgraded the Quad conversation to the apex level is by itself the most significant outcome. It highlights the importance of international cooperation to address global challenges. The summit today was hosted by the United States and it is President Biden's first plurilateral engagement. As you know, since President Biden took office, our Prime Minister has had two conversations with him. Today's summit provided opportunity for a detailed exchange with President Biden and the other Quad leaders. At the meeting, the four countries emphasized their commitment to the principles that unite us and underpin all our national experiences, our shared belief in democracy, pluralism and market-based economic principles. We are all committed to a free and open, inclusive and rules-based, secure and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. This is a region that is home to all four of our countries and to many partner countries, including, of course, our friends from the ASEAN. As you are aware, the approach for our engagement with the region was enunciated by the Prime Minister in his landmark speech at the Shangri-La Dialogue in 2018 in Singapore. And the vision of Sagar, or security of, and growth for all in the region, was also enunciated by the Prime Minister. In his remarks at the summit today, Prime Minister Modi emphasized that the Quad is a partnership for global good. Today's summit saw the Quad leaders adopt a positive agenda and vision, focusing on contemporary issues such as vaccines, climate change and emerging technologies. Prime Minister said at the summit today that he saw this positive vision as an extension of our ancient philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which, as you know, regards the world as one family. At the summit, the leaders sought to strengthen the moorings for peace, stability and well-being among the people of the Indo-Pacific and in the global community. Their discussions also extended to post-pandemic recovery, resilient supply chains and maritime security. And as we, I think, have the Q&A, I'll also try and share with you some of the different ideas that might have come up during the course of the discussions. Now, many of the objectives that were enunciated at the Quad summit are reflected in the concrete takeaways of today's meeting, of which the Quad vaccine initiative is perhaps the most pressing and valuable. The four countries have agreed to a plan to pool their financial resources, manufacturing capabilities and capacities, and logistical strengths so as to ramp up the manufacture and distribution of the COVID-19 vaccines in the Indo-Pacific region. We believe this will speed up the process of post-pandemic recovery and enable families and businesses to put the COVID-19 crisis behind them and move towards normalization. In other words, this is a special initiative which is designed proactively to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 among countries in the Indo-Pacific. And I think the four countries are really leveraging their respective strengths. But again, more on that as we go into the question-answer session. India, of course, we welcome this initiative as it recognizes our own manufacturing capacities and capabilities. We look forward to wholeheartedly and unstintingly participating in this endeavor. This is a vaccine supply chain which is built by trust and being built to convey trust. It is an example of the human-centric international cooperation and globalization that the Prime Minister has referred to on more than one occasion. It is also a validation of our reputation as a reliable manufacturer of high-quality vaccines and pharmaceutical products. During this COVID crisis, that has been much in evidence. I must say that during the discussions, there was a wholesome appreciation by the other Quad leaders on India's role in providing vaccines to 70 countries all over the world under the Vaccine Maitri initiative. And it's important for me to emphasize here that we have, what we are creating under the Quad vaccine initiative are additional capacities that are being created and will not, I repeat, will not in any manner affect our domestic vaccine production and rollout. In a sense, the Quad initiative builds on the Vaccine Maitri experience, as I mentioned, which has been very successful. And it is evidence that Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat are reliable contributors to global supply chains and augment global availability of critical commodities and products. At the meeting, the leaders agreed to the creation of 3 working groups, and these are a vaccine expert working group to implement our path-breaking commitment to safe and effective vaccine distribution, a critical and emerging technology working group to facilitate cooperation on international standards and innovative technologies of the future, and a climate working group to strengthen climate actions globally on mitigation, adaptation, resilience, technology, capacity building and climate finance. India looks forward to being a part of all of these working groups. I have already spoken on vaccines, frontier technologies and their safe and judicious use for the security and prosperity of all, and advancing the effort against climate change in every possible manner are articles of faith for India. We welcome the opportunity to cooperate even more closely with our Quad partners in these areas that have been identified. The 4 leaders did agree. This is a virtual summit. This is the first summit of its kind, and it had to be held virtually because of the circumstances. But the 4 leaders did talk about an in-person meeting. There was agreement that there would be a Quad in-person meeting sometime later this year. It could be in the margins of a major summit where all 4 leaders are present. It could also be in the United States or one of our countries concerned. And of course, the Quad will continue to meet at the foreign minister and official levels, and we will be participating in all of these meetings. So what I've done is I've tried to offer you a snapshot of the extent of the discussions and purposefulness of the discussions today among our leaders. The meeting has set a benchmark for the Quad's future efforts in the interests of the Indo-Pacific community and global society on the whole. There will be some documentation that will be released now following the summit. This includes a joint statement, which is the first time that the Quad is issuing such a statement jointly. There is also a fact sheet regarding the 3 working groups that have been set up. I'm now happy to take any questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for those remarks. Foreign Secretary will take only a few questions. What I'll do is I'll start with questions that I've received from those who joined us online. There's a question from Pushkar from the New Indian Express. Who will finance the vaccine initiative? Will India be helming the affairs of the initiative? And I also have a similar question from Dipanjan from Economic Times. What are prospects of vaccine supply chain initiative transforming into supply chain initiative in other sectors between Quad members? So
well, I think these are very good and valid questions. When we talk about the Quad vaccine initiative, what the leaders have tried to do is to leverage our respective strengths and then collectively work on these strengths towards an initiative that will be there for the betterment of the people of the Indo-Pacific region. Now, what are these strengths that we are leveraging? One is the United States' technological prowess in manufacturing quality vaccines. US vaccines will be manufactured in India. India's manufacturing capabilities and capacity has been recognized in this regard. I did mention to you that each of the other 3 Quad leaders made it a point to talk about the success of India's Vaccine Maitri program, our endeavor to supply vaccines all over the world despite our own domestic requirements. I think this has been seen as an important initiative to address the COVID-19 and put behind us this pandemic. But our essentially manufacturing capacity is something that is going to be leveraged to make US vaccines, and this additional capacity that we will create in this vaccine initiative that the Quad is undertaking will be financed both by the United States, the Development Finance Corporation of the US, and Japan's JICA and their JBIC, Japan Bank for International Cooperation. So you will have financing from the US and Japan, and you will have Australia contributing towards last mile and logistical delivery issues. In other words, Australia will also finance countries that are going to receive these vaccines. They will finance cold chains, they will finance training, they will finance the ability of these countries to absorb effectively and use these vaccines for their immunization programs. And we are talking really about Southeast Asia, the Pacific Island states, Indian Ocean countries, and the Indo-Pacific in general. So this is, as I said, a very unique initiative. This is, in today's context, one of the most important initiatives you could think about, because keep in mind that Quad will work closely with COVAX, with WHO, with Gavi, with CIPA, with all of the organizations, the G7, that is involved with vaccine production, distribution and assistance offered on a humanitarian basis to countries all over the world. There will be close coordination with all of these organizations. But what's important is that we are talking about huge investments in creating additional vaccine capacities in India for export to countries in the Indo-Pacific region for their betterment. And in doing so, of course, the financing would be available in the numbers that we need. We are talking about producing about 1 billion doses of vaccine by the end of 2022. It's an ambitious target. If you look at the fact that vaccines all over the world are limited to a few 100 million, 1 billion doses is a very large number. But we are talking about really immunizing people in an entire region, if not the entire world. And this is something that is both an ambitious and a much needed initiative that the Quad is undertaking. There is also talk among the leaders of looking at future pandemics. This is not going to be the last pandemic. This is something that was discussed, that was recognized, and that in case other pandemics come, maybe Quad should invest also in creating capacities that will enable us to deal with them. Because after all, if you invest in developing additional capacities that can produce 1 billion vaccines, it really means that you are prepared for the next pandemic, that you're looking at other areas which you can help and contribute in. You're creating health capacities which have never been there before.
Thank you, sir. The next question which I'll read out has come from Devi Rupa from The Wire. Compared to previous times when China has compared the Quad to an Asia-Pacific NATO, the response from Chinese Foreign Ministry has not used those kinds of robust descriptions and has been more cautious in the run-up to the Quad summit. How do you see the official Chinese remarks on the Quad summit?
Well, you see, if you look at what the Quad really stands for, it is looking to create conditions for a free, open, inclusive, prosperous, secure Indo-Pacific region. In other words, it is looking at an area in which we can identify with, given our shared values, and what are the Quad, what are the main principles that guide us. It is a value for democracy, it is respect for the rule of law, it is trying to ensure that navigation, there could be free international navigation in international waters and in the sky. We are looking at peaceful settlement of disputes, and of course sovereignty and territorial integrity of states, which is an important principle anyway. And if you look at some of the agenda that we talked about today, it is a constructive, positive agenda. We are looking at climate change, we are looking at vaccine development, we are looking at new and emerging technologies, looking at connectivity. These are all areas which are in the realm of positivity. As far as India is concerned, we have always said that the Quad does not stand against something, it stands for something. That means it stands for something which is positive. It stands for doing something which is in the realm of consideration for others, And as I mentioned, Prime Minister talked about global good. He talked about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. These are the principles that we stand for. This is the principle that the Prime Minister spoke about within Quad, and I think all the leaders shared the Prime Minister's vision of a globe, of a world that is looking after its people, that humanity is the most important consideration, and we as nations that have the capabilities to contribute in that regard should come together as Quad members and do so. So that, I think, is should put to rest any speculation about Quad's activities directed against any states or others. Quad is an organization that is working towards a very positive agenda, and I think that is also brought out by the outcomes that you see in the summit. Look at the working groups. It's vaccine, technologies, climate change. The agenda is a positive one.
There are two questions on Myanmar, similar ones. Seema Goa from Outlook. Did Myanmar come up in the discussions today? Any specific action suggested for Quad members to act together for restoring democracy? And a similar question from Gautam Lahiri.
Well, I want to tell both Seema and Gautam that the Myanmar issue did come up for discussions under the regional issues agenda. Quad leaders felt that given the strong democratic credentials of each of the Quad members, it was important to work towards the restoration of democracy in the country. The Prime Minister highlighted the fact that as a neighbor and friend of Myanmar's, India attaches great value to democracy, peace and stability in that country. He advocated a constructive approach that would take into account the needs and aspirations of the people of Myanmar. So it was I would say, a discussion that took into account the current situation, took into account the fact that democracy was important for all our countries, and that the restoration of democracy was, an important objective, and that it was important for countries to work in a manner that was as constructive as possible in order to attain this objective as we all saw it.
So the next question is from Pushkar from the New Indian Express, where discussions held regarding expansion of the grouping and including some countries of the region in the grouping. And a similar question from Shankar from India versus Disinformation.
Well, I have to say that there was no discussion on expansion of the grouping. I don't think that was something that was envisaged. But some members did speak about working collaboratively with other countries and other regions. In that context, Europe did come up as a region that was taking a greater interest in the Indo-Pacific. You've seen that Germany has adopted guidelines in the Indo-Pacific. France is already working on the Indo-Pacific. Netherlands is doing something. The UK is considering something. So Europe as a region was seen as a possible potential partner with whom the Quad could work. But these are only discussions. I'm not talking about decisions. These are discussions. But no, the issue of expansion of Quad was not discussed.
Can we take a few more questions? So I'll take a couple of questions from the floor. Okay, so please identify yourself and your organization and wait for the mic to reach you. I see Maha.
Sam Maha from CNN News 18. Did India raise the issue of embargo on exports of some critical raw material for manufacturing of vaccines, which could probably hamper the production in India as well, even as the Quad is looking at the vaccine initiative?
So, from what I understand, this is a US, issue. The US, under the Defense Production Act, has prioritized certain exports of materials that would be used in vaccine production. This was not taken up in this meeting because it is a bilateral issue for us. It is not an issue that involves the whole of Quad. We have taken this issue up with the United States officially and through our ambassador in the US. And I think due consideration is given to this very important point that we have raised.
Pranay.
फॉरेन सेक्रेटरी प्रणय उपाध्याय एबीपी न्यूज से। मेरा सवाल इस चीज को लेकर है कि हाल के दिनों में हमने देखा कि फॉर्मल स्ट्रक्चर जो है वो क्वाड का बन रहा है। क्वाड पहले फॉरेन मिनिस्टर लेवल पर आया और अब सीधे समिट लेवल पर। तो मेरा सवाल इस चीज से जुड़ा है कि ऐसा क्या हुआ अचानक कि इसको समिट लेवल पर एलिवेट करने का फैसला लिया गया, और आगे इसका फॉर्मल स्ट्रक्चर क्या होगा? ये जो तीनों ग्रुप बनाए हैं, इनकी मीटिंग्स किस तरीके से होंगी, और क्या इसमें सिक्योरिटी आर्किटेक्चर को लेकर भी कोई चर्चा हुई है?
related.
Do you have a related question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Smita Sharma. Just to add to Pranay's question, I mean, how much of a trigger would you say perhaps is the situation post the LAC aggression and what played out between India and China been in a way that India has been a keen participant of this upgraded Quad in several ways? And did any of the regional security, the specific issues of the situation in Hong Kong or the LAC situation, was that discussed also during the talks?
प्रणय, आपसे ये बताना चाहता हूँ कि ये जो निर्णय हुआ है कि समिट लेवल पे क्वाड का मीटिंग होगी, ये अचानक डिसीजन नहीं लिया गया। ये मतलब आप अगर देखेंगे तो 2007 में हमारी ऑफिशियल लेवल पे एक मीटिंग हुई थी क्वाड की, उसके बाद 2017 में ऑफिशियल लेवल मीटिंग्स हुए थे, 2019 में पहली दफ़ा फॉरेन मिनिस्टर लेवल पे मुलाकात हुई थी क्वाड की, और अब आप देख रहे हैं 3 फॉरेन मिनिस्टर मीटिंग के बाद क्वाड की समिट भी हो रही है। तो ये ज़रूर ये तो सहमत है कि ये क्वाड की पहली समिट लेवल मीटिंग है, पर ये एवोल्यूशन, इसका एवोल्यूशन अगर देखें तो ये नेचुरल एवोल्यूशन भी है। इसमें आगे जाके कैसे स्ट्रक्चर्स होंगे जो आपने पूछा था, इसमें आपने देखा है 3 वर्किंग ग्रुप्स तो हुए ही हैं और भी कुछ सजेशंस हैं, पर 3 वर्किंग ग्रुप्स के साथ हम शुरू करेंगे, उसके बाद देखा जाएगा। जैसे क्वाड के समिट्स, इस साल भी एक और समिट होगी, इन पर्सन समिट के हम बात कर रहे हैं, तो जब होगी तो तब देखेंगे कि कैसे इसको बढ़ाया जा सकता है या कैसे इसका स्टॉक इसका रिव्यू हो सकता है। रिगार्डिंग योर क्वेश्चन स्मिता, आई थिंक obviously under regional issues there was a discussion of a number of issues that were important in the geopolitical context, in the fast changing context of the Indo-Pacific, and certain areas and certain issues did come up for discussion. There was a fairly candid exchange of views, and I think leaders were on the same page on the importance of having greater sense of consultation, discussions on issues that were of common interest to all of our countries. I can't go into each of these individual issues, but needless to say, these issues were important for our region, and all 4 countries being from the region looked at it from the viewpoint of countries that had a shared perspective on many of these issues.
Okay, Parikshit.
So you've already outlined that US and Japanese financial institutions will fund India's additional manufacturing capacity for the Indo-Pacific countries. Now, will this also be followed by maybe talks between India and United States on faster clearances for certain other vaccines which have been approved in the US, such as Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, Moderna? And was there also a conversation on setting up a supply chain, a resilient supply chain on?
All right, there you have it. Joint statement, 3 working groups, and a commitment this year to have an in-person summit. Let me quickly open up this conversation once again. Professor Nalapad, here we go. 3 working groups have been formulated. They'll be meeting hopefully in person during later this year. Enough done for one day, 2 hours.
Well, I'd like to say, Rishabh, I was very happy when the summit level meeting was announced. That itself is a sign that the Quad has come of age. And I'm in fact very happy that there's so much talk about vaccines and about climate and about technology and so many other things, because it is now very clear all 4 countries understand the nature of the war that is being waged on each of the 4 and many other countries by China. It's not just a kinetic war, which is the way war is perceived in the Western world. It's a war involving minds, people, thoughts, technologies, health, everything. And the fact that there is, frankly, almost no discussion about the dragon in the room is for me a very reassuring sign, because frankly, in wartime, as the Admiral will testify, you don't reveal your intentions to your enemy. As far as possible, you try and keep the enemy guessing, or hopefully give the enemy information that you know is wrong.
So here we are.
I'm extremely happy, frankly, by what I'm hearing Foreign Secretary say. He's an outstanding Foreign Secretary. I think he's handled it very well. And secondly, Rishabh, I'm delighted that there's going to be a joint statement. Frankly, I'm looking at things in practice. I want a formalization in practice. It need not be in so many words, but if it is, and the fact that there is a joint statement is this formalization.
Yeah, that's for the first time. Admiral Sinha, here we go. A joint statement, planning for another meeting this year itself in person, 3 working groups, vaccination drive. So India's vaccine diplomacy has become the Quad's vaccine diplomacy. Good enough? So unmute yourself, sir, as you speak.
Yeah,
go ahead.
You know, Professor Nalapat has said it very well. We have all been saying that it requires some kind of institutionalization. So this is now being instituted, that there will be 3 committees. There will be subjects to be discussed by these 3 committees, and we will have subsequent meetings. I'm sure that we are heading in the right direction, and it's only a matter of time. And you know, the security aspect. Well, let's not forget that the underlying theme is that China is becoming a very difficult country. It wants everybody else to follow its own system of governance, which is completely single party, single man.
Yes, so we have consensus, but we had consensus. The question was, what are we doing to operationalize on that consensus? Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary, joining us on the telecast as well. Ambassador Sibal, I think it's to be taken to note that the Foreign Secretary himself has come out this evening to issue this statement. He's taken questions at length, and a joint statement is coming out. 3 working groups. Is this an institutionalized Quad as far as you see it, sir?
Oh yes, indeed. You know, when we had these recent meetings of Quad, we've not been able to issue a joint statement. Each country issued its own statement, laying emphasis on what they consider to be their priority areas of interest within this forum. You know, having a joint statement at the leadership level, at the summit level, is a very difficult diplomatic exercise. Because once you commit yourself to a certain position at that level, there's no drawing back. And therefore, every word has to be considered very seriously in terms of its nuances and implications. And the fact that they have had a joint statement means that they've been working on it. They've been working on it for some days. It can't be produced just like that, because each foreign office has to look at it very carefully and its nuances and everything else. So this means that the Quad is now taking a serious step. Now, it's not going to have a secretariat and other things for the time being, but the fact that they now have 3 working groups, which means that they have a specific agenda on which to work and join their efforts to advance that agenda. We don't as yet know. At least I don't know what the mandate of these 3 working groups would be, but it's quite clear it will be the issues that are in the forefront, whether it is vaccines or whether it is climate change or emerging technologies, the areas which India has highlighted.
Okay.
So I think it's a very good beginning, and the fact that they're going to have another in-person meeting means that the commitment is now there that once the COVID business allows us to
do it regularly. Okay.
There will be
a lot of hope has been expressed.
And the agenda will move forward.
Yeah, Ambassador Sibal, a lot of hope has been expressed that this is going to include ASEAN countries. I think specifically the Foreign Secretary has said, pointed out to the French, to the Germans, to other European countries as well. Are we seeming to say that this would have only been said if positive signals from those capitals have already come our way?
I don't know in what context he said that, but I think it may not be very wise. Even when this group of 4 hasn't yet consolidated itself, you were talking about inviting everybody in. Then you might as well have a regional security architecture under ASEAN, under the East Asia Summit. So how do you distinguish Quad from the East Asia Summit? So I'm not sure what the Foreign Secretary has said, but what he probably means is that other countries have shown interest. And in these working groups, if they want to join in and given their input, they're welcome to do so. But the Quad working groups will be actually led by the 4 countries.
Yeah, okay,
so
by,
I'm not
by the
very
Quad.
clear what it means.
Yeah, that was the reference of context to
the Quad, even before it has consolidated itself.
Okay, that I think was reference to context to maritime security. But let me get Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor into this. Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, here we are. You were talking about joint statement. Here it is. 3 working groups, another meeting. This is pretty institutionalized. They haven't appointed a Secretary General in the get-go, but so far so good.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's very great outcomes. Once the Quad has declared that what it stands for, and it's very clearly enunciated, so automatically the forces which are inimical to that are put on notice firstly, in my reading of the statements. And secondly, when they talk about, they have not yet formalized anything about partnerships, but there have been interests expressed by France, Germany, Netherlands, European countries and some ASEAN countries to support the Quad objectives. I think that is a good sign, because while the Quad consolidates, there is no harm in talking about getting support from the outside, from other powers all over the world.
Okay, getting support versus the caveat drawn by Ambassador Civil of confusing support is also important. Ambassador Malhotra, here we are, sir. The Foreign Secretary has come out. That shows the gravitas of how this is being taken in all capitals. The NSA in Washington is expected to make a press statement. They plan to now meet in person, these 4 leaders. So far, so good?
Yes, the Foreign Secretary's press briefing has made a number of things very clear. Now we have more clarity. It's a good thing that the summit took place, and now they are going to have a joint statement also. Obviously, when you have a joint statement, there is a commitment and there is a clarity about also the goals and objectives. There is again a clarity. You talked about the expansion of this grouping. As far as I remember correctly, or if I heard correctly, Foreign Secretary, in response to a question about the structure, had said that Quad there has been a natural evolution of Quad, and at this point of time they don't envisage any expansion of this 4-member grouping. And he did mention about the Europe in particular was mentioned as a possible partner at a later stage. There are individual countries about with whom. So here we have a clarity on that also. And he also has tried to dispel the Chinese fears that it is against them by saying...
well, he's been a diplomat. But okay.
So he is trying to, at least from India's point of view, make it clear, look, China, don't get upset. Because China is clearly upset. They have been telling us not to fall into a trap.
It is so they get upset.
Saying, don't fall into the trap. So that's the diplomacy part of it, trying to tell China, don't worry, this is not against you. But the fact of the matter is, it is in all its dimensions, keeping China in mind. Everything.
Okay, just stay with me, sir. Just stay with me.
Even the vaccine is to counter Chinese vaccines.
Okay. Mr. Iyer, here we are, sir. As good as it gets. I mean, it's a long haul. But honestly, I've also been covering the MEA now for 12, 13 years. To get something concrete out of anything is generally very difficult. Here we have a statement. We've been waiting for a statement for a long time. I think the working groups is telling us where this is actually headed.
Yes, indeed. And I believe that all the boxes have been ticked. It's a very, very encouraging beginning. And the fact that they are going to first coalesce as a group of 4 and do a few things before they start opening the door for other countries such as Germany, France, United Kingdom augurs well. Let's wait and see how this plays out. In fact, all this is going to lead to what is going to be the outcome of the other meeting between Li Keqiang and President Biden in Alaska. So is that a plan B that's being planned for the future of China? I don't know. I'm just thinking that there is a lot of significance there now.
Okay, let me just take a break for 1 minute. We come back, we pick up the conversation on the other side. See you in a minute. Here we are, something historic we've been telling you for several days. Well, it has happened. It's being taken with the measure and the gravitas that it needs to be. We are under no illusions that this is a long haul. This is going to be 10, 15, 20 years. So this is a long haul. But within this, there will be tests along the way. And the few minutes that I've got left, let me present myself that premise as well as to our panelists. Professor Nalapat, now when the next China-created crisis comes our way, so far we've been looking for an Indian response, a Taiwanese response, a Japanese response. Can we now, or at what stage, do we reasonably expect a Quad response?
Well, I'd like to say, Rishabh, that we have these committees that are declared, and I'm sure there are, we don't have to call them working groups of friends who have agreed to meet periodically and discuss other issues, and we don't know what the issues are. So far as expanding is concerned, I would welcome France, I would welcome the UK in the plus column, I'd welcome Vietnam, I'd welcome the Philippines, I'd welcome Indonesia very much in the plus column. But I think over time this is going to formalize, and if it formalizes, I think the 4 existing Quad members should be the veto-wielding countries. Like you have the veto-wielding countries in the UNSC, you can have the Quad members as the veto-wielding countries, and the rest as the plus in the council of the Quad.
Okay.
We need not call it security, but I think the ambassador is absolutely right. I mean, everything about this is about security. And may I say one thing, Rishabh? There is no point in you having a wonderful house and very lovely family if your door is wide open, your windows are wide open, and your gates are unsecure.
Okay.
Security is paramount to prosperity.
Okay. Vice Admiral Sinha, here we go. Sir, in a real sense, next time now, and it's inevitable that a China-related crisis will come our way now, in days, weeks, months, we don't know. Should we now expect a Quad response? Should we look at a coordinated response, or is it still every country for themselves?
Well, I think if you're talking about military action, we are still some distance away. But if you're talking about, making a statement and showing support, then possibly it will happen. And that should send some message to China that the next step could become a military one. So I think that we are heading in that direction, but we are not there yet.
Okay, I think that's a fair assessment, Ambassador Sibal. And then, if I rephrase the question, at what point do we reach? Because this is the long haul, 10, 15 years, China ain't going to disappear off the map. We have a lot of economic catching up to do. The crises aren't going to go away. So at what point of time do we start looking for a Quad response?
Look, I don't expect a kind of seriously belligerent action by China against India. I think they have learned the lessons from what they did this time in Ladakh, and India stood its ground without help from anybody apart from some measure of help from the United States of America, diplomatic and in terms of intelligence sharing. And as time passes, India will develop its own capabilities, and China will be very close to test India's resolve again. There could be pinpricks here and there, but I'm not too sure. I think they will try to cut their losses, and certainly before the July 1 meeting of the Communist Party, China will not make a mistake of starting the crisis, because Xi Jinping will find it very difficult to justify another loss of face in terms of India standing up, and India also this time garnering a little more open support from the others, political, if not in any other respect. In the longer term that you mentioned, I think we'll have the capacity to stand alone, and we should work on that basis. Our problem with China, if you allow me 15 seconds, our problem with China is on the land primarily. In the maritime space, we are strong enough yet. But on the land frontier, nobody is going to put feet on the ground. They may help you here and there, but ultimately the burden of defense will fall on ourselves. And therefore, there are certain very important decisions we have to take in terms of military organization reforms, acquisition of technology, acquisition of equipment, etc., etc. And I think we are on the road to that.
Okay, so we're in the right direction. July, of course, being the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party formulation, which is why he's mentioned the date. Let me quickly get in Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor on this. Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, I'm asking the question because there will come a time when we will be tested. And that time may come soon, it might come a bit later, it might be a larger crisis, it might be a China-created crisis, it might be a proxy China crisis. What if there is a genuine blackout of large cities in Japan or in Australia or in India? That's a crisis of a cyber war. At what point of time will we be comfortable that a Quad coordinated response will take place rather than every country ad hoc doing something?
Okay, Rishabh, what I feel is that it's a very good development which has happened, that they're going to have an in-person meeting in the course of this year, and you will see some more steps, taken at that time towards that eventuality. And any other actions by China which are negative to any of these countries will automatically propel that situation arising sooner rather than later.
Okay.
So thank you.
Okay, so anything belligerent that the Chinese were trying to do either via proxy or directly only, just then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the more the likelihood of a reaction. Sri Iyer, same thought to you, sir. At what point of time should we now start looking? I don't want to, presage this, but I also don't want to underplay it. That when do we start looking at the Quad for global leadership and no longer at the UNSC?
I think it's already beginning to happen. If you look at what has been, talked about around the world, it has been this formation of Quad, what its objectives are, what is it going to do, how it's going to be a deterrent for China's ambitions all over the place. I mean, this is the strange thing that China is doing. They've opened their war on multiple fronts, and anyone knows that that usually leads to a big loss. So we have to wait and see what they are going to do next. And I think Quad is now giving a very, very strong statement. I hope that they will match it with action. I'm especially curious to see what India is going to do vis-a-vis its engagement in Afghanistan, especially through whether the access road from Iran is going to be completed so that India can quickly be able to move its troops, should they decide to do so, into Afghanistan to help.
Okay, the big questions, Turkey is another big question, future of NATO, big questions, lots of big questions remain. I quickly leave the last word with Ambassador Malhotra. Ambassador Malhotra, here we are. At what point of time does global leadership, do we all start looking towards for leadership from the Quad, then all the other organizations and multilaterals and forums that are out there?
Well, Rishabh, that it may take some more time before Quad can replace UNSC or other established international organizations. But should a crisis be caused by an act of China and Quad keeps quiet and there is no coordinated and concerted reaction or action, then I think there's no point in having Quad. It will become yet another talking shop. And that would be the test, the real test of the Quad if Quad doesn't react.
Okay, I think the resolve has been clearly shown. I have never had such a long conversation with so many people from so many different countries as I have had today, where there is absolute consensus that this is the right thing to do. We were on the right side of history at the end of colonialism. I think we are on the right side of history once again. Gentlemen, thank you. We leave it there. Good night.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.